Hello everybody, and welcome again to my channel. I wanted to review the January 2016 Watchtower because there are some really good instances in here of where the governing body is doing a great job of sticking their foot directly in their mouth, and I just wanted to point that out. So early on in the magazine, you have this little section on a page about training and how it's a precious gift, and they instruct you how to train. So the first thing they say is what to do: give people tasks that are within their capabilities. Well, this is not the way that it usually works. Historically speaking, the organization has said they'll assign you something and you had better figure out how to do it. And they liked people who would do whatever they want, whether or not they had the ability, and that has oftentimes led to some pretty stupid things happening. So now they're telling you to give people tasks that are within their capabilities. In other words, don't follow the example that's been set by the governing body for decades. It says what to avoid: do not micromanage others. This is coming from a group of people that write extremely detailed instructions about how you are to engage in your ministry, and they regularly change those instructions. They tell you when you're to engage in special campaigns. They tell you exactly what's supposed to happen at your meetings. They tell you when you're supposed to sing your songs. They make that uniform for everybody. They micromanage every single facet of the life of one of Jehovah's Witnesses. If you have ever been an elder, you know that this is even greater for elders. Elders have specific instructions about everything they do. They have a book giving them those instructions, and they have countless letters from the society detailing exactly how they're going to do everything they do. So basically they're saying do exactly the opposite of what the governing body does. And they say this again, the next paragraph: avoid drawing attention to yourself. Don't go on stage in front of thousands of people demanding applause when you give your talks. Don't have a webcast that you're forcing all of your followers to watch, that you're a regular fixture on. Don't be seen as something special. So basically, if you want to train people, look at the governing body and do just the opposite of what they do. That's basically what this article is saying. So moving on, in page 11, this is about brotherly love, and this particular paragraph on 18 is talking about those taking the lead. So in paragraph 18, it lets you know that you can make the elders unhappy. You are personally, individually responsible for the happiness of the elders. In the middle of that paragraph says, never would we want them to lose their joy or decide because of something we do. That's right, the elders are not happy individuals on their own, nor can they be. You can mess up their entire life and make them miserable. If the elders are sad, it is your fault. That's what the paragraph's telling you. That's a really healthy message, don't you think? And the subheading to the next section is keep on doing it more fully. Here you see the repeated theme in Jehovah's Witness literature that however much you're doing, it is never enough. You can always do it better. What? You're only a pioneer? Why aren't you in foreign language? What? You're in foreign language? Why aren't you going to a foreign land? What? You're in a foreign land? Why aren't you a circuit overseer? What? You're a circuit overseer? Why aren't you a branch servant? There's always something more that you can do. It is never enough. Let's move on to page 14. Page 14, paragraph 9. It asks you some questions. In what areas am I doing well in following in the steps of Christ Jesus? In what areas could I improve? Is that really what they mean? Do they want you to go give food to the poor? Do they want you to look after the orphans and widows? Do they want you to help the sick? Well, do they have a report for any of those activities? Does anybody in the congregation try to encourage you to do more of those things, or do they just try to encourage you to go knock on doors more? The only thing they care about is how many hours you spend talking to others about the Watchtower, how many pieces of Watchtower literature you place, and so on and so forth. So they're really not asking you how you can imitate Christ more. They're asking you how you can get out in service more to spread more of their literature. And they drive that point home in paragraph 11. They give the example of an 84-year-old widower, and he didn't think he could auxiliary pioneer, but people in his area helped him, and lo and behold, he met the 30-hour requirement. The message here: if this 84-year-old in poor health can put in 30 hours of door knocking and magazine placing, why can't you? You have more energy than him. If you're not doing at least what he's doing, you are not doing enough. You got to step back sometimes and say, I really appreciate the way that the governing body imitates Christ's teaching method. Of course, Christ always guilted people into doing things by telling them that they just weren't doing enough. And, so what can you say? Anyways, though, guilt and fear, it's been working, hasn't it? All right, so page 25 is where we want to go next. Why is this? No, that's not the page I want to go to. I'm sorry, my pages are all out of order here. Let's start at page 19. The Watchtower has decided that they're going to tell you how you can figure out you're anointed, or rather, they're going to help you figure out for yourself whether or not you're anointed. And they tell you a couple times. In paragraph 10 on page 19, said, those who have received a special invitation from God do not need another witness from any other source. So nobody can tell you whether or not you're anointed. You will just have to know by yourself. And then moving on to page 21, paragraph 15, they give you a bunch of questions that you can ask yourself based on how much do you want to do Jehovah's will type questions. How much do you go in service? So if you're really zealous, does that mean you're anointed? No, it does not. So then again, at the bottom of their paragraph, they repeat, those called by Jehovah do not wonder whether they have been invited or not. They know. So in other words, they're telling you again that it's not up to them to tell you whether or not you're anointed. And they can't set criteria. But is that how they really feel? Page 25. This is where we are now. Paragraph 13. Those taking the count at the memorial cannot judge who truly have the heavenly hope. The number of partakers includes those who mistakenly think that they are anointed. Some who at one point started to partake of the emblems later stopped. Others may have mental or emotional problems that led them to believe that they will rule with Christ in heaven. Therefore, the number of partakers does not accurately indicate the number of anointed ones left on earth. So, this is a massive instance of doublespeak. They said, no one can tell you whether or not you're anointed. You know, but by the way, if you think you're anointed, you're probably mentally ill. There's no point of counting because we can't accurately know, but there has to be people that are taking wrongfully, despite the fact we don't have the authority to tell them whether or not they're anointed. So that's really the case, is the Watchtower thinks that if you're partaking, you're mentally ill. Well, I kind of agree with them because, I mean, the governing body all partake, so they're kind of basically calling themselves all mentally ill. You know, it's about time they made that admission. Maybe that'll finally be the chance for them to finally get the help they need and to finally straighten themselves out now that they know what their problem is. Anyways, moving on. Paragraph 15, page 26. Jehovah chooses when in history he will select anointed ones. You know, it's really a breath of fresh air that after 130 years of the Watchtower trying to tell Jehovah when he had to stop selecting anointed ones, that they finally admit that it's his choice and not theirs. You know, most of the rest of the world, knew that it wasn't up to them to tell God what to do, but the governing body has finally put that one together. So we got to give them a round of applause on that one. It's about time that they finally realize that they can't tell God what to do. Well, at least in that particular respect. So anyways, moving on to the last article. Working together with God, a cause for rejoicing. And I'm just going to cover the review questions here because those pretty much sum up the thesis of the article. And the thesis is that the more time you spend knocking on doors, the better person you're going to be, the happier you're going to be, and the less chance that you'll get this fellowship. So the first review question, why can it be said that the preaching work brings us happiness? Well, the honest answer is that it can't. I've known a lot of pioneers that were miserable for one reason or another. Pioneers that couldn't find a suitable mate, pioneers that really didn't like what they were doing. They're really good at putting on a face of happiness, though. In fact, at the pioneer meetings, the pioneers are encouraged, look, even if you're discouraged, pretend to be happy, to encourage the friends to pioneer more. So really, when you see a happy pioneer, you don't honestly know if they're happy or not because they're being told on a regular basis to look as if they are happy, to put on that front. A lot of pioneers are really miserable, and they exhibit this by, a lot of times, by the amount they drink. And if you get them in person, if you're really close friends with them, they might actually tell you how miserable they are. So the answer is that the preaching work does not bring people happiness. There probably are some that it does, but in my opinion, they're probably the exception to the case, not the rule. Next one, why can it be said that the preaching work draws us closer to God and to others? Once again, it can't. People who spend a lot of time in pioneering still get this fellowship. They still do things that are wrong in God's eyes. In fact, oftentimes you'll find pioneers that have disagreements and disputes with each other. And then they'll say, oh, well, this is just because they're imperfect people. But the reality is that sometimes there might even be more disputes among pioneers than just among the regular sheep. So really, that being the case, you cannot say that being involved in preaching work more often draws you closer to God or to others. In fact, if you look at the information, it might be, well, I'm not going to say it might be just the opposite, but there's no reason to believe that it draws you any closer to God or to others, based upon the fact that pioneers get disfellowshipped, pioneers get removed, pioneers have fights with each other. And that's not uncommon. In fact, it's at least the same rate as occurs within the congregation, maybe slightly higher. And then that kind of answers the last one. Why can it be said that the preaching work is a protection for us? Quite simply, it can't. Pioneers have still gotten disfellowshipped. If it was a protection, a pioneer would never get disfellowshipped. End of story. So that was the review of the January 2016 Watchtower. And as always, I encourage you, go ahead and feel free to read it for yourself and to form your own opinions. But I'm just letting you know my review of the material that's in there. So, thanks for watching.